With the change of leadership in Moscow, last week was a momentous one in the communist world. We spent part of it in Cuba with Fidel Castro, the only leader in the Soviet bloc who chose not to attend the funeral of Konstantin Chernenko and to forego the opportunity to meet with Chernenko's successor, Mikhail Gorbachev. What Fidel Castro chose to do instead was to appear on U.S. television on a broadcast he knows President Reagan watches. With his official interpreter sitting in with us, for 3 hours we talked, and then we walked all around Havana. Here then, some of that talk, some of that walk, and then back to the interview. What are the chances that this new generation of Soviet leader will make the Soviet Union less adventuresome in Latin America?
¿Cómo dice?
Adventuresome?
Less adventuresome.
Menos aventurista. And what are the adventures of the Soviet Union in Latin America? Nicaragua, El Salvador. Do they have soldiers in Nicaragua? Does the Soviet Union have anything to do with El Salvador? Come on, this is a myth.
You say it's a myth?
Usted dice que es un mito. Yes, definitely. It's a myth, totally.
Mr. President, the President of the United States believes it.
Well, what can we do? At times I have said, talking with some North Americans, that there are many beliefs in the United States, and at times there are few ideas, and what is asserted once is considered as an obvious truth. I can assure you that the Soviet Union has had absolutely nothing to do ever with El Salvador. Now, in the case of Nicaragua, it's the same.
What am I to say? The President of the United States, the Secretary of State, the Secretary of Defense, the National Security Council advisor, when I get back, they're going to say, listen, he gave you propaganda, nothing but propaganda, that he and the Soviets are deeply involved in Nicaragua, deeply involved in El Salvador.
Es lo que dicen ellos.
That I'm making propaganda? Look, I will say something. I believe that there is a misunderstanding concerning Cuba's positions. If the starting point is the idea that we are anxious to improve relations with the United States, that is a mistake. If the starting point is the idea that it is necessary for us really to improve situations with the relations with the United States, that we have economic needs, political needs, or needs of any other type, that is a mistake. I will tell you the truth. It seems to me that the President of the United States is being ill-advised. I'm not going to say that he's ill-advised in everything, but in some things I think it is obvious that he's ill-advised. If not, the President of the United States would not have ever compared the volunteers of Lafayette with the mercenary criminals of Somoza who are waging the dirty war against the Nicaraguan government. The Sandinistas are defending their homeland against foreign aggression.
If you hold to this position, President Reagan holds to his position, sooner or later there's going to be a bloodbath.
I will ask a question for the improvement of relations with the United States and Cuba. Nixon established relations with Mao Zedong, and I ask, Nixon's ideas, were they the same as those of Mao Zedong? So then, we do not have to have the same ideology, nor the same point of view, that is the United States and Cuba, for us to improve relations.
A philosophical question, if I may. And let me use the hypothesis.
Permítame utilizar una hipótesis.
And get your reaction to this.
Y ver su reacción.
You studied philosophy, isn't it?
Usted estudió filosofía. A bit.
Well, this will not take a doctorate in philosophy to answer. You have made of Cuba one of the most dependent nations on earth. That you may not like it, there's no joy in it perhaps for you, but you depend on the Soviet Union for money, for food, for medical supplies, for military hardware,
for your very survival.
en su propia sobrevivencia.
Now, with that hypothesis,
Ahora bien, con esa hipótesis,
is it worth it for Marxism to do
¿vale la
that?
pena el marxismo para hacer eso?
Yo estoy de acuerdo con eso,
I agree with you,
pero a la inversa.
but on the inverse.
Porque nosotros somos el país más independiente.
Because we are the most independent country of the world.
Que no depende
Because we do not depend,
lo más mínimo
not even the slightest,
de Estados Unidos.
on the United States.
¿Qué país hoy
And
día
what country at present
depende menos de Estados Unidos?
depends less on the United States than us?
More of what we talked about after some of that trip around Havana. One of the first things you notice about Fidel Castro is how little security he has. Few leaders anywhere move among their own people with such relaxed confidence. Some of this may be because the best of the opposition has left Cuba or is in jail, but Castro is popular with his own, and the light security around him is part of the proof. Talking at length and passionately is one of Castro's trademarks. Another is his curiosity. The man constantly asks questions about home life and families, recipes and local gossip. It's all done with jokes and good humor. What's your favorite TV show, he asks a woman. He grimaces at her reply. That's a lousy program, he says, and she likes it best. Havana seems a little cleaner, a little brighter than it was a few years ago, but the overall economy may be even tighter. You can see it on the streets. Plenty of buses, mostly from the East Bloc, a few from Japan, but very few private cars. In an economic system able to survive only through heavy infusions of Soviet money, private cars are strictly a luxury, partly because fuel is too precious to waste on them. We stopped at Old Havana, all that's left of Cuba's long colonial past. Castro was eager to show it off. Some of the old buildings were being refurbished and archaeological sites restored. In one of the old buildings that once was a governor's house and church, we talked of religion and the Pope. Castro was raised a Roman Catholic. Now, he says, he criticizes the Pope when the pontiff supports the status quo, praises him when he speaks out for the poor. The church in Cuba is free, Castro insists, as long as it doesn't meddle in politics. And he had a question for me about my questions on his relationship with the church.
Es la segunda vez que lo digo, pero
Me está hablando de papa, de obispo, de
you're talking to me
sacerdote,
about Pope,
Le
priests,
quiero preguntar
and
si está
bishops,
haciendo
and I want to ask you whether you're
de sacerdote aquí y me está
playing the priest here and
confesando
whether
a mí
you're
totalmente. ¿Cuál es la
whether you're
diferencia
asking for my
entre
confession.
un
What's the
confesor y un
difference
periodista?
between a confessor and a journalist?
The journalist is an honest broker of information only.
El periodista lo único que hace es sacar la información para después distribuirla.
Sacar
Es una
información.
especie de corredor de bolsa de la información.
Professionally, no religion, no
Bueno,
politics.
Profesionalmente no tiene que ser religioso.
Prefiero al confesor,
Then I prefer the confessor.
porque el confesor cuando le está
Because the
preguntando
confessor,
por
when
su
he's
falta,
asking for your
no las
sins,
publica
he
por la
doesn't publish
televisión.
them on TV.
You look to be a healthy man. You've certainly been vigorous in this interview.
Saludable, indudablemente en esta entrevista ha sido enérgico.
¿Y usted también?
You too.
Los dos, ¿sabes?
But let me tell you what I hear.
Déjeme decirle qué cosa.
I don't make this up.
Yo no estoy inventando esto.
A doctor,
Un doctor,
New York heart surgeon.
en Nueva York, el cirujano del
There's a
corazón,
report that he came down to examine
se
you in
informa que vino
Cuba
aquí
last
para
year.
examinarlo usted
Is this
en
true?
Cuba el año pasado. ¿Mí?
Yes.
¿Es esto cierto?
Is this
Médico
true?
A
norteamericano
U.S.
de nuestra
doctor?
Yes. U.S. doctor?
Jamás.
Never.
How about an eye doctor?
¿Cómo se llama
Reports
ese
circulated that
médico?
you even
¿Quién
came...
es ese médico?
Even, well, in the case of the eye
Ni el
doctor...
pelo siquiera no recuerdo. La vista. De la vista.
Eye doctor.
Eye doctor. Report was that you even checked into Columbia Hospital.
Incluso usted se inscribió en el hospital de Colombia. Look, it might be a double or a someone, pero no fue usted. Where does that come from?
You came to power as a young man in your 30s.
32 tenía.
32.
Fue la revolución.
You're now 58.
Ahora usted tiene 58.
Sí.
Right.
When you look in the mirror in the morning, you see gray in your beard
Cuando usted se mira al espejo, ve que tiene canas en la barba.
and in your hair.
Yes. Y en el pelo.
Does it bother you? Do you say to yourself,
Le
"Ooh,
molesta.
I'm getting old.
Si
I'm
usted
really
se
getting
pregunta,
old"?
me estoy poniendo viejo.
Mire, le voy a decir lo que
Look, I will tell you what happens. Which is something interesting. I myself have asked,
¿Cuándo me voy a adaptar a la idea?
when will I get used to the idea
Estoy poniendo bien.
that I am really getting old? I have not let myself get full with the glory or self-sufficiency, lack of modesty, that of feeling superior to others. That is, I have not let myself follow the question of the conception of what is called the drug of power, the drug of government. I never speak of power because I never relate power to myself.
You've observed President Reagan. You've never met him, have you?
Por la televisión.
Through television.
What do you think of him? What do you really think of him?
¿Me pregunta?
You're asking me?
Yes.
Sí.
¿Que haga un juicio sobre su política o sobre
Pass
su
judgment
persona?
on his policy or what?
No. Number one, what do you think of him as a man, as a person?
¿Qué cree usted? ¿Cuál es su opinión de él como
And
persona?
then two, what do you think of him as
Y
of
segundo,
his policies?
¿qué cree usted de su política?
Voy a empezar por los
I will start with the first,
con relación a la política.
with respect to policy.
Tenemos grandes
Well, we have great differences
desacuerdos totales
and total disagreements
por su concepción.
because of his conceptions on socialism, because of his crusade, his idea of a crusader. It's an aberration. That this is something that must disappear from the face of the earth. I think these are things that belong to other times. It does not seem realistic or rational. Many people made criticisms, comments, that whether Reagan had only read a book, or one book, that Reagan despised intellectual work. Well, that if Reagan was not intelligent, really I don't believe that. I don't believe it. The differences I have with him are political differences, differences in conceptions and of ideas. That's where the great difference lies, but I do not underestimate it.
Through all of those hours of talk, I kept thinking, why is Fidel Castro doing this? And why is he doing it now? Is he genuinely worried about the new generation of Soviet leadership and what it will do? Frankly, I don't know. But I did come away with the impression Castro really believes that maybe, just maybe, President Reagan will decide to try with Cuba what Richard Nixon did with China. And without changing his ideology, Fidel Castro wants to give that the best chance he can.